Welcome to The Pestle, reviewing and breaking down movies to look for insights into the movie-making process. Hosted by Nightmares. They attack when you can't see it coming. Sneaky buggers. Now, let's dim the lights and not fall asleep.
Welcome, everybody, to The Pestle. Today's show is brought to you by Kit Kat Club. Come for the show, but stay for the candy at the Kit Kat Club. Welcome, everyone, to The Pestle. I am Wes.
And I am Todd.
And we are filmmakers and a bunch of other things. We have a lot of experience behind the camera, in front of the camera. The whole process of making anything for video is an arduous one. It takes a lot of, if you're, depending on what you're doing, documentaries even take a lot of pre-visualizing and figuring out what you want to do ahead of time, let alone something, as specific as a movie or a short film. There's so much that goes into it, and we love to watch a film, pull it apart and see what's making it work. What are the things happening underneath the hood to give you an emotion, to give you a feeling, to give you dread. All those things kind of combine into the experience, right? When you show up to a movie theater, it's for the experience, whether that's to feel a specific emotion like fear in a horror film, or to feel, relief, that things worked out the way you wanted them to. Or sometimes maybe you just want to punch in the gut. Maybe it's just a good reminder that you're alive. All the things are possible in storytelling. And that's what we do. We like to see why do these stories work the way they do. Catharsis, themes and stuff. I don't know. I forgot where I was going.
So when you go to a movie, what do you look for? Like, what's the first thing, I guess, that you notice or maybe in post film, maybe think about when you leave a theater?
I think the first thing I look for whenever I'm watching a film is authenticity.
Man, that was a fast answer.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
I'm really big on authenticity, and it pulls me out pretty quick whenever I think that there's nothing, that the actors are acting, that the camera work is there to wow you. And it just makes me think of everything that isn't the story. Whereas finding something, I was listening to an interview actually between William Friedkin, who did The Exorcist, and Darren Aronofsky. And it was interesting listening because Aronofsky was talking about Mother, and he was like, yeah, we rehearsed this thing for 4 months and then we got on set. And Friedkin was like, whoa, hold the phone. Like, for The Exorcist, we rehearsed for like 4 weeks and then we got on set. And I felt like everyone was being very rote, and they all the freshness was zapped out of it. How the heck do you rehearse for 4 months and get something fresh out of it? And Aronofsky was like, well, here's the thing. I had Jennifer Lawrence, and during 4 months of rehearsal, she gave me absolutely nothing. Like, she did not demonstrate character at all. And she saved it so that once we had the blocking down, all the movements, like, then we got to filming, and suddenly it all came to life that she held back. And
did he know that? Did she tell him that?
He suspected, but I think he was just trusting her. He was like, oh man, I think he was a little worried. Actually, I think he said that. He was like, I was terrified. But I also know it's Jennifer Lawrence. Like, she's a known entity here. And I think they were even dating at the time. And so maybe there's just a level of trust that they had built. I don't know. I am terrible about understanding the love lives of celebrities because I frankly don't give a shit. And so at some point they were dating, I guess. And so, yeah, I find that pretty quickly. And whenever I see, like, on set, my own actors doing that, I get pulled out of the scene. I'm like, I can't hear the story through all of your perfectly positioned words. Like, I wanted a little bit messier. And so when I see that on screen, it just screams, we didn't find it. We didn't find it. And I stopped trusting the story. Now, it can work whenever it's something so heightened that it's its own thing, right? Wes Anderson, that's clearly all super rehearsed. Aaron Sorkin films are all super rehearsed, but they're also carrying their own kind of tone. And that's why it works in those universes. And so, add an asterisk everything is context dependent in my worldview. And so walking into a film, I'm like, oh man. And then walking out of the film, I think it is still a little bit of the authenticity. Like what am I feeling? What did it leave me with? If it didn't leave me with a feeling, I'm never going to tell you about it. Like, whereas my favorite films, the stuff I walk out of that really leave an imprint on me, are stuff that is so small and it's so intimate. The stakes are just, minuscule. And because the characters care about this little thing, it makes me care. Like Petite Maman was my favorite film from last year. But if you go into that thinking that this is the best movie of the year, you'll probably be disappointed because the stakes are so, invisible. It's really not about that. It's about humans and connecting, and it's so authentic. Like it's just little girls on screen. Like, I don't even know, they might be 5 years old, and getting a 5-year-old to not pretend that they're pretending, it's magic. It takes real work, let alone to let them be on screen for 85 straight minutes or whatever, 75 straight minutes, without ever indicating that this is a performance and communicating an entire through line, an entire story. I melt away, and I'm in this, universe with these kids, and it's just amazing. It's that's the invisibility, I think, is what, I need to be persuaded that I'm no longer watching a filmmaker at work. I think that's the best way to put it. I'm looking for all the flags, and if I don't find them, I can't help but just, what's happening? Oh my God, and then I'm there. Yeah. What about you? Do you have anything?
I was going to say the invisibility of all the work that went into it. If it looks easy, as in, like, well, not easy. If I just see the story, like I feel it, like you said, and everything else melts away. I don't see the camera work. I don't see the acting. I don't see the actors, right? I mean, so the ones who win Best Actor are the ones where, they disappear on screen, the actor itself. So I don't see Heath Ledger anymore. I see the Joker. I don't see, Brendan Fraser, like I see the character, and it's that when they disappear, the less I see everyone else, the more I just see that rectangle and whatever's happening in it. That's what I register with.
That's pretty cool.
So interesting. Great, fast answer there.
Yeah. Thanks. Yeah. A lot of everything I'm always interested in is all about real portrayal. Like, I hate in my own work over framing things where everything has this perfect view of X. Like, I like a little bit more obfuscation, where it almost feels like a documentary. And the more I can make you feel like you're watching a documentary, the more I think I won. The more I think I'm kicking your ass. I always think about The Bear. There's this monologue at the Hulu show, for listeners not aware. There's this Hulu show about a chef, and the show's called The Bear. And the chef is giving this monologue about how much pride he takes in cooking for people. And he almost looks at it as a competition. And every customer that walks through his door, he's like, I'm going to roast your ass. You don't know what's about to hit you. And I love that. Like, on the one hand, you're trying to give something to people, but you're also, because of how much stuff we watch, everyone is aware of cameras and lighting and acting. And so now, to me, that stuff is no longer the competition. It's how to make them forget that stuff. And so I hate overly lighting things. I hate overly framing things. I want people to get punched in the face because they forgot that they were watching a story. Instead, they were just, empathetically experiencing the story. Yeah. And that's my goal, man. I'm trying to roast your ass.
That's awesome. Love it. Being roasted.
Roasted you.
Awesome.
Okay.
Yeah. So today we are covering Prisoners, Denis Villeneuve's Prisoners. So if you haven't seen this film, please pause it, go watch it. It's streaming on Netflix, at least at the time of this recording, because we're going to spoil a bunch of stuff, all the things.
Yeah, all the things. And we'll touch on some of the cinematography and camera movement, as well as a look at some of the story and writing, good detective, bad detective, testing faith, and other such stuff and things and stuff.
Quick synopsis of the film. When Keller Dover's daughter and her friend go missing, he takes matters into his own hands as the police pursue multiple leads and the pressure mounts. Directed by Denis Villeneuve. Screenplay by Aaron Guzikowski. Sure. Cinematography by Roger Deakins, featuring Jake Gyllenhaal as Detective Loki, Hugh Jackman as Keller Dover, Maria Bello as Grace Dover, Viola Davis as Nancy Birch, Terrence Howard as Franklin Birch, Melissa Leo as Holly Jones, and Paul Dano as Alex Jones.
Your wife thinks you've been helping us. We both know that's not true.
I used a lie to bury our dog last year. And helping the cops sounds better than I've been driving aimlessly in my truck because I don't know what the fuck else to do.
Is that what we were doing last Saturday night?
Probably. Am I a suspect?
No, I'm only asking you. I'm only asking because you assaulted a man who's now missing.
I heard about that. What happened to him? Thought you had him under surveillance.
I'm going to assume that you're asking me because you have no idea.
Yeah, well, I didn't think it was something I could get away with.
It's not.
Yeah, well, it couldn't be that he skipped down because the asshole was guilty. Oh, it couldn't be that, right? Because that'd mean it'd be your fault, right?
Mr. Dover. Mr. Dover.
What?
You need to take care of yourself and your wife. That's the best thing you can do right now. That little girl is gonna need you when she comes home.
Kid's gone for more than a week. Have half as good a chance of being found. And after a month, almost none are not alive. All right? So forgive me for doing everything I can.
You know what? It hasn't been a fucking week.
You're right. Day
It hasn't been a
fucking
week.
6. Day 6. And every day, she's wondering why I'm not there to fucking rescue her.
All right.
Do you understand that?
All right.
Me, not you. Not you, but me. Every day.
All right.
So forgive me for not going home to have a good night's rest. And why didn't you look for my fucking daughter rather than fucking...
Hey.
Don't follow me.
Hey. Mr. Doyle. Mr. Doyle. You don't think I'm gonna let you get behind the wheel after you've been drinking, do you?
I'm gonna walk. You look for my daughter.
So, yeah, Todd. I think this is your favorite Denis film, or at least it's up there. I've heard you talk about this film a number of times, and yet it's about probably your greatest single nightmare.
Yes. Well, so yes, it is my favorite Denis film. Easy. Hands down. I love everything he does. I think he's what you described at the beginning of the episode. He is authentic, if nothing else. Just, he puts you in a place and he keeps you there. But he puts you there for a reason, right? He wants you to feel something and he's not going to let go until you feel it. And that is welcomed in so many ways, even the worst ones, i.e. this movie. Yes, it is every parent's worst nightmare. And I don't think that you can really, I know you can't put it into words. The idea, So let me just talk about the film itself before I talk about the feelings and emotions behind it. I think that it's probably one of the most perfect movies if someone's described, hey, what's a perfect movie? It's got to be this. There is no moment when I ever see the directing. I don't see the cinematography. I don't see the lighting. I don't even see the written words on the page. A lot of times, I can, even if it's acted really well, I can imagine a script that was memorized or a script that was worked on by the actor, right? And in this, I can't. It's so visceral, and I think it's because of what it's about. Hugh Jackman has kids, and so this is a perfect role. Someone who doesn't have kids could never play this role. I absolutely do not believe that somebody that does not have kids could play this role authentically, at least not to the point that someone like Hugh Jackman, who has kids, does. But I think that 90% of men who do have kids could play this role as good as Hugh Jackman. That's the difference. That's why I think that this film is so authentic, because anybody put in a situation like this would act the same. Like it's really a visceral story that is told from the point of view of someone who their only reason for being on the earth now is to protect this person who they can't protect anymore. It has been taken away from them. And so not only does Hugh Jackman's character feel like he's let her down and he's let his daughter down and let his wife down and his whole family, but he has no purpose anymore. He's purposeless, which is the only reason he can do what he does to Alex. It's the only reason he can go through, because he's a religious man. We open the film with him saying the Our Father. He says the Our Father before, turning on the water, when he's torturing him. It's hard for him. It breaks his heart. It is destroying who he used to be. But at some point, that guy was already dead. When his daughter disappeared, that guy died. So it just makes it easier for him. So many times in the film, I asked myself, could I do that? Would I do that? And so many times, like, it's easy to say, oh, I would destroy this dude, but we see Keller destroy him, and yet he still doesn't talk, and he has to continue doing that. And so if you're asking me, would the answer is yes, I would. But at some point I gotta question, how much more can I do to a person? Can I kill a person who I am 99.9% sure did it, but then have all of these outside factors happen? Like, they're chasing this other guy who has run from them, and now I'm questioning, and there's a bloody sock that is found by the police, and it's her sock, and now, do I have the right guy? I don't think that he necessarily ever really questions himself, but out loud. But I think that internally, he is warring with that. Internally, he knows Paul Dano does it. He did it. He knew Alex did it. He really did, and he believed that wholeheartedly. But at some point, when he's beating the crap out of him, and he's exhausted because he's beating him up so much, and with all those outside factors, he had to have asked himself, am I willing to kill this guy, thinking that possibly there could even be a slight doubt in that he did it. He never says that, but I think that that's internal at some moments. And then he sloughs it aside, kills himself, kills who he was 100%, and turns the water on. You know what I mean? And that's him trying to save not only his daughter, but himself, and it's an unbelievable story that is terrifying and visceral, and like makes you think. It leaves a scar with you that is fun to talk about. It's fun to talk about the story. It's fun to talk about, what would you do? How far would you go? But yeah, the story is brutal. The directing is absolutely flawless. The cinematography is amazing. My favorite shot of the entire film is the hammer shot from outside of the bathroom. And I think that says a lot about the thought that Denny puts into, and not just Denny, but Roger Deakins puts into what is happening here. What we are going to do in this scene is we're going to put Keller, and we're going to put Franklin in that bathroom with Alex. And we are going to watch from the outside this happen. And they could have so easily, and so many directors would have just gone into the bathroom and cut back and forth between Alex and Keller, and it would have been great. It would have been, like very visceral and in the moment, and you're part of it. But there's something even creepier about being outside, not cutting, watching the entirety of that happen, thinking, oh my God, is he going to smash his hand? Oh my God. And then he, hitting the sink, like scaring the crap out of you. But that's another amazing thing about Paul Dano and how incredible of an actor this guy is. He doesn't flinch at all. And I am sure that they practiced this. I know they did and everything, but just to have that much trust in Hugh Jackman to not hit him at any point, because Hugh is in it, like no actor ever, Hugh Jackman is one of my favorite actors of all time. After The Fountain and this film, I cannot find anybody else that like does emotion the way that guy does. And so to have him screaming in your face with a hammer, and it's a real hammer. I mean, it's gotta be a real hammer.
Yeah.
Right. And then to swing it like that, and he doesn't flinch at all. Not his face, not his hand. He just 100% trusts. And it's just incredible. It's really incredible. His delivery with every line, because he doesn't have very many, is it's flawless. And I think that the mixing is really great too, because it's hard to hear him on purpose. A lot of times you mix a film so that you can hear lines, but Frank or Alex's lines, they're very understated. They're very under the breath. And maybe the car door is slamming when he says a word and you can't hear it, or like, somebody's taking a step or coughing or something like that over his lines. And they purposefully put him beneath all of that so that we can't hear what he's saying. It just makes him even that much more mysterious and seem like, he totally did it. He totally did it. And, part of us knows that he did it because we heard what he said to Keller in the parking lot. But at some point when we're seeing all this stuff, we're going on this journey with Keller. And at some point we're thinking, wait a minute, did he do it? Or is he just like a crazy kid who's like messed up in the head and he said this thing because this other guy is running and he's got the maze situation in the house, and like, what are we sure? And so I'm sitting there, and I've seen this movie 6 times,
crap.
7 times. And every time I'm like, oh, would I turn the water on? Would I do that? And I mean, every time the answer is yes, but I ask that question. Even if it's a split second, I always ask that question because I'm a human being, and doing something like that to another human being is difficult no matter what. Because there is this tiny doubt that's planted by Denny, somewhere else. Because of that tiny doubt, it's hard. It becomes hard. Now, if we didn't have that doubt, if that guy hadn't run, if we hadn't found the sock, no, I'm beating the snot out of this guy until he talks. But it's brilliant. It's brilliant. I'll let you talk, and then we can ask questions and talk about some more.
That's awesome. I have a love-hate with this one in terms of impact that I think it's having on viewers. I hate, seeing a story about kidnapping. It's just so rare. Like anything that makes people real, afraid of what could happen when they turn their back. It sucks because not that many kidnappings happen, of children. Like, I guess you could talk about whatever, journalists and that kind of thing. But, in America, you're far, far, far more likely to have a child under the age of 18 kidnapped by a family member than some random stranger. And I think that's also why, it's so alluring to watch these stories, because it is so rare. Like, watching someone get into a car wreck doesn't faze us, even though that's so much more likely, to impact our lives in one way or another. And yet we're just kind of numb to it. We've accepted those things. And kind of like Keller, he's arranged his life to be prepared for anything, and yet he comes into the one thing you cannot prepare for. And it's not like he's doing a bad job of parenting. And I don't know, we could probably have a really healthy debate about, free range parenting, quote unquote. Growing up, we just called that being a kid. But, the fact that, he's telling his daughter, yeah, you can go as long as you take your brother, and then he's doing his best to make sure, however old she is, I don't know, 4 or 5 years old, she's pretty young, has some oversight. And so it's just, whatever, 100 kids a year get kidnapped by strangers or something like that. And you are almost as likely to be struck by lightning. Like, it's such a rare phenomenon. Like, I think 30 people a year get hit by lightning and die. And so it's like, it's just a really, and yet, we kind of watch stories like this and we really get sucked into, not my kid, never my kid. Well, probably not. No, but whenever it does happen, it makes national media because it's rare. And so I don't know, that watching this movie, I'm like, this is a really great, gripping story. And I wouldn't want to change that just for, argument's sake. It just bums me out that I think a lot of people out there really, because that is the worst nightmare, and seeing it realized in this kind of way paints the impression that this is something you need to be super vigilant about. Maybe not super, just be kind of vigilant. Don't do anything super dumb and you'll probably be fine. The thing that I love about it though, again, going back to impact and takeaways, he tortures this guy, and I don't love that he tortures this guy, but I love that it gets nothing good comes out of it, because torture doesn't work. Torture does not work. Like, it produces unreliable intel even when the quote unquote professionals do it. It's just not a useful approach to getting, clues or information that's actionable. Instead, often, people say whatever you want to hear. Like, and it sucks. And why I love that in this film is because we have so many other TV shows and movies where Jack Bauer goes and, breaks a guy's finger and suddenly he's singing like a canary. Like, it's just so absurd and it's just not reality. And so, to your point, this movie is full of authenticity, because at the same time, I really believe Keller Dover goes into that bathroom and wrecks shop on this guy because no one is listening to him. No one's believing him. And at a certain point, even though it's wrong, you feel like as a father, you have to take matters into your own hands, especially when something is so clearly, the solution to your problem. And so I don't fault Keller Dover for doing what he's doing necessarily. I just love that the takeaway, if people are actually, extracting anything from that aspect, is nothing good. He doesn't win anything per se by some happenstance. It dominoes into, saving his daughter, but that's completely unintentional. Those are, side effects, not, the prescription. And so, but all that, shenanigans aside, it's such a good movie. Like, I don't know that you can watch this movie and not get just pulled in and heartbroken and terrified and confused. And it does such a great job of throwing out all these disparate threads that you're like, okay, well, that's weird, but it has nothing to do with this. And then finding a way to tie them all back together, and suddenly it forms this beautiful whatever rope, and you're just like, oh, it all comes back together. But they do a great job of like leading you astray time and time again until it's time to loop it. It's beautiful storytelling, and I'm guessing this is an original screenplay. It doesn't read that it's based on a novel or anything, and so this is just a really good. I don't know how you come up with this for a story. Normally, this is the kind of thing that you do expect out of a book, like, because there's so many threads, right? And there's so many interesting details, and there's so many internal motivations that are happening. Every character has a place. Like, there is no random characters in this film, whether you're talking about even the sons and daughters, right? Ralph and the other daughter, the Birch daughter, like, they have a relationship and they're talking. Even if you don't necessarily understand that it's happening, it's happening. Like she's in the bathtub on the phone with Ralph, and they're talking about how hard it is on them. And so they have their own life that they're going through off screen that you only get glimpses of. The way everyone is handling this is wildly different. Obviously, Keller is going whatever full, I'll destroy the world, man on fire. But also, his wife, Grace, is just falling to pieces to the point where no one can even listen to her. Like she isn't getting out of bed. And both of those seem real. The way the Birches are handling this, Franklin, versus Nancy, they're handling it in their own way, and they're struggling, but they're doing what we think you should do, which is wait for the cops. Go look, do what you can, but wait for the cops. And then whenever they get, I love this because they're kind of the canary. Whenever Keller brings them in and gives them the opportunity, okay, hey, I won't stop you. And he won't. He literally leaves. They can do whatever they want now. He's not over their shoulder waiting to say, okay, well, if you're actually going to free them, then I can't let you do that. No, he literally gives them every opportunity to do the right thing. And they wage their own little war. Like, well, hold on. Now that the power really is in our hands, and it's kind of the point you were talking about, like, could I do it? They're kind of our litmus test for rationality, and they fail. It's, what do you do as a parent? Like, you have some power now. Do you not exercise the power? And it's such an interesting thing about, you have the hammer. Do you use the hammer? And suddenly they're handed it. And so every character in this film has a worldview, has a perspective, has power to some degree or another. And it's really amazing storytelling to fuse all these characters, give them enough space. I think that's also why it's 2.5 hours. Everyone needs time to develop. Sorry, you were going to jump in.
Well, I was just going to say, it's funny that you say that, because one of the things that I didn't say was that I feel like this is a classic case of there are no supporting actors. Right?
Yeah.
Like the idea of a great movie means that there are no supporting actors. Everyone is a main. They have their own thread that we do or don't see on screen. It doesn't matter. They have their own history. What happened before? Something happened before for everyone. And we feel that for everyone in this film. And it's hard. It's really hard to do that. I mean, I can't tell you, I could probably count on, one or two hands the number of films that do that really well, where it's noticeable, where I feel weight to every single person that has, a presence on the screen. And I do. I mean, from everyone from Keller to Franklin, to Franklin, to Alex, to even the priest. I mean, like, everybody has some kind of weight to them, and it's and a purpose, which is very hard to do when you have so many. I mean, and so many names, like these are all big, huge names. So it's very easy for one of them to take over the screen. For Jake Gyllenhaal, like one of the biggest actors in the world, sitting next to another one of the biggest actors in the world, Hugh Jackman, sitting next to one of the other biggest actors in the world, Viola Davis, to Terrence Howard, so it's really easy to see just like a masterclass at work, but really what it is they just disappear into the ethos of whatever this world is, but they all have their purpose of being there. I do have a question then. If you feel this way, my question to you would be, what would you do in that scenario? Like if everything happened to you the way it happened to Keller, what would you do? No wrong answer. I'm just curious.
Yeah. I don't think he was wrong to watch the guy. I'm probably doing that. I'm just watching though. Like realistically, if I'm being completely honest, I don't grab the guy and start wailing on him, because I think that's how you lose information. And I obviously understand the impulse. Like, of course, especially after watching this guy like choke the dog, right? You're like, oh, so he has violent tendencies. He said this thing, they didn't start crying until I left. He knows about them. I need to gather information, and I'm just going to watch this guy. And I probably stop sleeping. I probably get a tracker, throw a tracker on this guy's van, watch every single place he goes, because one of those places is where those girls are. And so it's a lot of that. Maybe I creep around his house, wherever he stays at night. It's not clear to me if he actually stays with his aunt or some other place. I'm assuming he does, but if so, I probably start looking around in the middle of the night. But I think if he's just hanging out there watching this guy day and night, he finds his daughter within a few days, and it's that lack of patience. It's that lack of, and again, it's understandable because all your judgment gets clouded when you now are feeling the ticking of the clock, because time is important. You don't know where and what's happening to those girls. But if you're so certain that he's involved, all you have to do is just watch them long enough, and it'll unfold itself. But that's the hard part that's why I'm not a cop, right? Or whatever.
Yeah. Then what that means to Keller is standing still.
Correct. And he can't.
And he cannot do that. That is not in his nature, is not who he is. So yeah.
No. But grabbing him and pulling him off the street also means that if this guy is the only thing keeping his daughter alive, he just removed their lifeline. Mm-hmm. And so for all he knows, they're stuck in some vacuum cage. Like imagine they're locked in some cage and no longer have access to food or water. Well, every single second that they're not getting that is a second they're closer to dying. And so, in a lot of ways, I just think, the irrationality kicks in, but if you can hold on to your rational mind, and whatever, make a pros and cons list or something, I don't know what you do in that. It's impossible. It's impossible. But I'll run through some cinematography stuff real quick, and then we can come back to where the story kind of leads you here and there, because it is fascinating. The cinematography wise, very controlled, right? All the camera movement is super, super controlled, right? It gives you a feeling of inevitability. In VR, we like to say we're on rails. You can't move your experience. And it's like a roller coaster. You do not get to determine. The track has been set. So every time you feel this controlled camera movement, it feels fatalistic, predetermined. And whatever's going to happen, we cannot look away. We can't move. We can't change its destiny. Similar, like the scalding water bit. Oh man, it hits. I think it hits so hard for a number of reasons, but the lack of camera movement feels like we're locked in. We can't look away, and it's kind of that cold logic taking over that feels so much more painful, because he's in a war with himself, Keller, but at the same time, he's committed. And it's that commitment, I think, that is represented in the camera work. There is no wavering here. And so everything's locked off. And it's so good because then you add in the screaming, the steam, the inescapability of it. It just feels so much worse. It just is visceral at that point. It's all playing in harmony for sure. Another little controlled camera move that I love, and Denny is I think famous for it at this point, these slow push-ins, these creeping movements. But he does it in a way sometimes that I'm like, oh, I don't think I've seen that before. If I have, I certainly didn't notice it. And to a large extent, I didn't even notice it in this movie, which is at the beginning, between the girls going missing and being there, right? We're at Thanksgiving. We're at the house, and we suddenly cut to the outside of the house. And normally when you want to reset time or establish the passage of time, you do these wide establishing shots of a location that you were just in. And now you don't know what's happened in the interim. That's how you pass time. And instead of that, we go to a shot of the house from the front yard of a tree. And we're slowly pushing in on the tree with the door just out of focus in the background. And it's creepy. It's so good because now we've done the reestablishing, we've reset the clock. And we did it, though, in a way that is unsettling. Like I'm sure he got, for coverage sake, a wide shot of the house. Like the studio is going to want this. And this is my first big studio film. And so let's do a little bit by the book. but this is the shot I really want. And it's a weird shot because there's really nothing in frame. I mean, literally it's a tree trunk. There's nothing interesting happening on the tree trunk. It's beautiful. It's weird. It's very Denny. It's, you know, as far as uncontrolled movements, there's very little handheld, but when it does pop up, and it does, the contrast makes us feel really unsettled and unpredictable, right? At the beginning, we take the RV with Alex in it, and it's dark, it's rainy. This is a very rainy area. I don't know if this is like the planet world from the second Star Wars or what, but like it's raining all the time here and it sucks. And it's obviously, you know, very thematic and emblematic of the story and what's going on. But when we jump into that RV, the camper, suddenly we're off rails, we're on just handheld and it's moving and it feels like we don't know what's going to happen. That predictability is gone. And it just completely makes you feel like anything could happen right now. Same thing. I think I forgot to really double check it, but I suspect it probably is happening in the room with Holly at the end, whenever he takes over and they get into the little gunfight. It begins to unsettle you again. Maybe not. I would have to double check that scene, but that would be an interesting place to insert, you know, handheld camera work. But TBD. Sorry, I didn't do all my homework. Apparently, I made a note and then forgot to double check it. And so the other interesting thing, cinematography wise, this is a fairly low contrast grade, which doesn't feel obvious because the blacks are pretty black. And yet all the highlights are there. Like at the opening shot of, you know, it's snow. You can see all that perfect highlight. Like it's way down in the grade, in the exposure, the EV or whatever. Like it's surprisingly low contrast for the most part, except when we do crush the blacks, it's through the actual lighting of the scene. And maybe it's, you know, a silhouette against a brighter light. And now you can create, you know, really dark blacks in the frame. Probably still often a lot of tiny detail left there. One shot that I was really kind of fascinated with, and this felt like a very Deakins thing to do, is at the end when Keller gets locked into the bunker and they cover it up. We go into pitch black. And what I found fascinating is he breaks out his little pocket light. Once again, Keller being prepared for anything, right? She took his keys and he still has a little pocket light. He's ready for almost everything. And then he turns on the little, you know, keychain looking light and finds the whistle and then turns off the light. And what's interesting is that they don't use an ambient light because, I mean, light is really, really fast. You don't get to see it fade on and fade off. It's either on and showing you something or it's not. And then you see nothing. And what I find fascinating about it is normally in order to demonstrate that he turned off the light, you would keep some ambient light, even just a fraction of a fraction, just so that you can see something, some kind of detail to let you know that he turned off the light. Whereas without that detail, he turns off the light and it looks like you just cut away because you're just going to pitch black. And so he turns it back on and then we're there again. And that's an important extra edit to go back in there to let us know that he is going to literally be sitting in pitch black darkness. And now we suddenly feel for him. That creates an extra level of emotion. It's just this extra visceral touch of what Keller is experiencing for every second we're not on camera with him, which is not again for the rest of the movie. Like we never see him again. And
what do you think about the waging a war on God scenario that they have that he builds in?
It's pretty fascinating. It takes us to some really interesting places from Keller's point of view. Like, I can understand why he does what he does, right? He has every reason to freak out with his daughter gone. He hears Alex say, "They didn't start crying until I left them," which is super telling. And then of course, like, I don't know what else you say about that. Like, he knows. And then he sees, Alex choking the dog, hearing him sing the song that his daughter was singing, with joy. And so you get why he's a man on the loose. And then you see what the detective is. Detective Loki is not actually a great detective. And so this gets into the good detective, bad detective bit. He's not very good at his job. I think the good thing about him is he doesn't stop. He just keeps going. But let's list all the crappy aspects of his shoddy detective work. And I love the clip that we played. Keller says, "You're the hot shot detective, hot shit detective. Like, you tell me, I just walked out of a liquor store and I got a liquor bottle. What do you think I'm doing?" And yet he's kind of bad with people, right? He has all these rote responses. I hear what you're saying. We're looking in all, I hear, sir, I hear what you're saying. He's very kind of bland cop. Like, he's not having a very intelligent conversation with this guy to let him know, here's what's happening in your case. Here's what we're doing. Here's the things that I can tell you. There's certain things I can't tell you because we need to keep this, in the pocket. It's evidence, right? If he tells Keller that, hey, here's the conversation that we had with Alex. Now Alex gets investigated by Keller, and then Keller feeds him the information, right? And then suddenly he can make Alex look like the guilty party and kind of de facto prove his case. That's not useful for a detective. And so you do need to keep some stuff, close to the chest. But he doesn't listen to anyone, like, virtually ever. We go see him talk to Barry's mom, right? Barry is Alex, right? Barry was kidnapped by these people and raised by these people. And now we're going to visit Barry's mom, and she's making this really good observation that RV was parked a few feet from where Barry was last seen. What do you think that means? And we see Loki chew on it for all of half a second before he's like, I'm more interested in what that means to you. You shouldn't be. You should be like, whoa, that is interesting. That's a really interesting thing you just threw at me. That can't be a coincidence. And yet that's kind of all he makes of it. He's like, I don't know. Moving on. He doesn't listen to Grace, right? That someone went through the window. He just sees this hysterical mom that's drugged out, and he's looking to discount everything she's saying. He doesn't listen to Keller, that Alex said what he said in the parking lot, because if he did, it doesn't matter if they're putting another unit on Alex. He's watching Alex nonstop. He's doing what Keller, was doing, and doing it better. And he doesn't listen to, he doesn't check Alex's history at all, right? Holly said, Holly's the quote unquote aunt, right? And she says that my cousins, Alex's parents, died in a car wreck when he was about 6, and we took over, raising him after that. Oh, okay. And he just takes it on faith, right? He doesn't go look up Alex's history, who is his parents, was his birth certificate say, any of this stuff. He doesn't verify any of that, right? He missed the husband's photo with the maze necklace because apparently they did go and investigate that house.
He picked up the photo and looked at him.
And it's like, there it is. And I also love at the end that the DA forces Loki to go to Holly Jones's house. He doesn't want to go, right? He wants to go do something else, whatever, go to the hospital and update the family or something. And I love that for a number of reasons. It's very much still Loki doesn't get it. He's being forced into the right answer. But it's also nice because it keeps it from feeling too convenient. Instead, make it a point of contention. And we're like, oh no, he's going to miss it. And instead, it feels a little bit more earned, like this chance could slip through our fingers, right? And so making that a little bit more contesting feels more satisfying from a storytelling perspective, instead of, oh man, I'm going to go to the aunt's house because whatever reason, it doesn't matter. Like, no, make it, a question of could he, won't he? And then, of course, I love at the very end that the detective is finally listening. That's our final shot. He's finally listening. And it's the whistle, right, that he's picking up on. But he finally does his real job, which is to actually listen to people instead of just assume everyone's an idiot and he's the only smart one in the room. And okay, so yeah, let's talk about the villain's motives. I love it. That's so terrible, but I love their motivation because what you have effectively are these two devout Christians, Holly and her husband, and suddenly, you know, their kid dies of cancer. And what is their response? It's to go to war against God by taking kids, making people lose faith. What does that mean? What does that actually mean? It means that they want to take God's children from him the same way that God took their child. And so it's a pretty thoughtful version of crazy people doing crazy shit. There's a lot of like these movies where someone takes a kid and I don't know, I guess we're supposed to just believe that, you know, a lot of terrible people exist because they exist. And they do. I mean, you can look throughout history and find plenty of terrible people who do this kind of thing. No question. It just feels so uncommon that I need a story, if you're going to make a movie about it, to justify it a little bit more in some way, form, or fashion, because sane people don't do this. It would have to be someone really whacked out of their mind, you know, to watch a story like this and believe that they're capable of doing it. And instead, if you want to make them sane and reasonable and logical to the point that they don't get caught, and that's kind of the key, crazy people are going to get caught, right? It's like if you're, you know, 4 sheets to the wind every day, you're just not going to keep an eye on your prisoner. You know, you're going to screw up. Something's going to happen that you're going to leave evidence behind. You're just going to get caught. You don't have the mental faculties to hold on to your victims. And so to have someone like this, you need to give them a really interesting backstory. And they did a great job. Like, yeah, these super devout Christians finally experience, you know, the randomness of life, and they can't account for it because they loved God so much. They were preaching. That was kind of their life. And suddenly, okay, now we have a war of faith. We're going to war. And I love it because at the beginning of the film, right, we have Keller. We see him praying, like you said, that's the very first thing, the Lord's Prayer, right? Our Father in heaven. We find him just not losing faith, but instead, where's my bloody note? Did I delete it like a genius? I think I did. So well done, Wes. But he has whatever the paraphernalia. He has a necklace. He has a cross in his house, in his car, right, hanging off his mirror, in every way, and he never loses faith. Right, even whenever he's torturing this guy, he never loses faith. And at the end, what we find is they never lost faith, because at the end we have Grace, who literally says, hey, he did what he had to do to find Anna. And I thank God for that. So they won. They won the war of faith against, you know, Holly and her husband. And so the villain lost the real war at the end of the day. God kept his followers, or whatever, however you want to phrase that. But I love also that they give us, the audience, some really great all is lost moments and make us lose faith. That's another thing that's happening throughout the film. There's that incredible reveal of the locked trunks in the house. God, right? And the only obvious explanation is those are bodies. Every single one of those is a body. And that's, you know, how he's keeping it hidden. You can't smell it. You can't do anything, right? They're just locked in these trunks. And he's got the maze on the wall, right? The same maze that's on the necklace of the guy who said he murdered these kids. And it's all starting to feel connected until he opens those trunks, right? And then it's like, wait, okay, there's no bodies. Wait, clothes. Oh God. So now we're never going to find them because they're buried somewhere. He's just got their evidence, right? And it's just this beautiful all is lost moment where we lose all faith. And yet Keller is right there telling his son, don't lose faith. What does he say? Something along the lines of, keep your faith in your sister. Ooh. And then we get to the bunker cell. And this is kind of a nice little all is lost moment as well, because he won't get in, right? He says, you're going to have to shoot me. Bang. Okay, well, there you go. Congratulations. But I think it's really important that he has that gunshot wound, because then it also puts a timer on Keller living long enough to be discovered. Mm-hmm. Now he's racing against the clock. Whereas you put him in there, you're like, maybe he can live a week, but suddenly you put a gunshot in him. She's like, maybe you got a day. And now the clock is ticking. The excavation team is leaving. They're like, hey, the ground's frozen solid. It's going to take weeks. And we know that he doesn't take weeks, that he doesn't have weeks. And yeah, it's beautiful. So yeah, I think there is this tug of war going on with faith, and it's pretty cool that the war is against God and against faith. And at the end of the day, faith wins. I think that's a really cool takeaway. Even though, whatever, I'm agnostic, but like I love the through line, the throughput of the story, kind of holding on to characters believing in something, even if, a lot of the time Keller is putting faith in himself. He's also still holding on to faith in his daughter, faith in God to keep his daughter alive. Yeah. I don't know. What's your takeaway on the faith aspect?
Yeah. Well, I was going to ask you, faith in what? Right? Because he can say the Our Father all he wants, but at some point he stopped saying it. Like he started saying the Our Father, and then when he said, forgive them their trespasses, he couldn't say that line. And so he stopped saying it. And, he then spoke to God instead of saying the prayer. But I think that was telling. I actually think he was losing faith in God, and not faith in him, but just choosing to ignore his own faith in God. He had to, right? He's like, I'm going to have to put aside what I believe is right, what I know is right. And so in that case, he kept his faith, but it was more of faith in him, like you said, in himself, that he was right, that he was like, I know this guy is part of it. I know he did it and he's part of it, to the point where I'm willing to damn myself by not being able to pray, by not doing what I know God would want me to do, because I'm going to fucking find her, no matter what. And it's obviously when it gets his faith, he knows that what he's doing is wrong. That's why it's hard for him, but he does it anyway. So yeah, I mean, I loved too, like the war, I think so many, that's another reason why it hit me, I think too, because I war with that myself, like I grew up Christian, I grew up, very Catholic, and, I guess for lack of a better term, lost my faith a long time ago, but it was more, it was different. But I think that every single day we're asked these questions of you believe now? Okay, here you go. You believe now? And then something else, you believe now? And so we have these wars, and it may be about something that doesn't happen a lot, but I think a lot of movies are about things that don't happen a lot. And that's okay, because they do happen.
Yep.
This has absolutely happened before. Yep. And so this is just a story of it happening, having nothing to do whether or not it happens multiple times.
Agreed.
And so here's a story of something happening and somebody responding to it the only way that they know how, like, I don't think he's the smartest guy alive. I don't think he's the dumbest guy alive. I think he's prepared. I love how they set his character up as like the prepared guy. Yeah. And then his wife calls him out. Like, you said you would take care of us. You made me feel safe. And so how can he then go? Because they put it like that, because they, set him up to be this protector. How can he go and do the right thing, sit out in front of this guy's house and just watch him? How could this guy possibly do that? Yes, that is exactly what he should have done. I think that's brilliant, and it's exactly what he should have done. But how could this character possibly sit and do nothing? He could barely sit there for a couple of hours. As soon as he comes out of the house and he does the thing with the dog, and And then they also instigate him so much. Him holding the dog up, Paul Dano's character holding the dog up, hurting the dog, and then singing the song was like egging him on.
Yeah.
Singing the Batman smells, Robin Lane is completely egging him on. So this is after he said the thing in the parking lot, after he sees him hurt the dog, and he's singing the song that the girls were just singing right before. The last thing he heard them say is this song. He's going to lose his mind. Obviously, he's just going to be like, I'm going to beat it out of this guy. Not thinking that, torture doesn't do. I also think that he's probably one of those guys that doesn't believe that torture doesn't.
Oh, for sure. No, he thinks it gets results. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Because there's a certain kind of person that thinks that if I hurt you enough, you're going to tell me the right information. You're going to tell me the information you know, right?
Mm-hmm.
But that's the other aspect of this is that, they say, like torture doesn't work. And I do believe that. But if you're in a situation where 100% this person did it and they just need to give you one piece of information, but they did it, like, and you're that kind of type of person, that's the answer, right? That's their answer, which is I'm going to hurt you until you give me this one, tell me one word. I want one, and I know it, And I don't think that anybody really would do something. Well, I don't think most people would do something like that unless they knew that person had the word that they're looking for.
Yeah.
But you mix this type of guy in this scenario with this guy who he knows did this, and it's his daughter who is young and little. That's the other thing. It's not Taken where she's 16, 17 years old. She's 6 and helpless and can't go across the street without her brother going with her. I mean, that's the other aspect of it too. I have a 7-year-old daughter, and every time she's like, "Can I go over to Edison's house across the street?" I watch her go into the house. Like we live on a street that is sleepy, and but it's a thing. It's a real thing. And even if it's the chance of like, okay, getting struck by lightning, we're not going to go play outside in a thunderstorm.
Right. It
does not matter how unlikely that scenario is. We're not going to put ourselves in that position because why? So, and it's when you said before, like, just don't do something stupid. Totally. Don't do something stupid, but allowing your toddler to go across the street to your house.
That would be stupid.
No, it's not stupid. That's my point.
Well, a toddler.
Well, not toddler. Your 6-year-old.
Okay, yeah, that's not dumb.
On a sleepy town, sorry, I misspoke.
Yeah, I was like, that would be fucking stupid.
Don't allow a 1-year-old to cross the street by himself. To allow your 6-year-old on your sleepy, they establish really quickly their neighbors. Yes. We're going to drive? No, we're going to walk. It's right there. And they just walk there, right? And so saying, yeah, sure, go, but take your brother, and she doesn't take her brother, and then it happens. Like, that really wasn't a stupid thing. That was it's understood. You bring your brother with you. They didn't do that, and hence the movie.
Yeah.
And
I get that they laid out all that, just to make kind of the best case scenario of we don't even let them go whatever without their brother down the street. I grew up doing that kind of thing on my own at 4 or 5 years old. That's not like, it's not crazy talk. And our world is starting to paint this picture of if you let any child who's below the age of 50, outside by themselves, that, you're a terrible parent. I used to run around the woods and run around the neighborhood and whatever at, a really young age. And it's not because it was a different time. Like, I don't know, maybe it was the worst time actually, because there was so little ability to track and see, where everyone was. And we have watches and all kinds of digital, big brothers around us that, as parents, we can take advantage or not, I wouldn't have judged them for that, but they did. They went that extra step of making sure, as parents, they're not like base level like idiots. And
right. Well, because on a film like this, you got to establish the different types of parent.
Yeah.
There's the type of parent was just like, I'm not going to let you out of my sight for a second. Every 5 minutes, where are you okay? You know, in the other room, in the house, you know, there's that type of parent. There's also the type of parent that's like, go out, play, whatever, you know, we're kind of the latter, you know, like I'll let my son run up, you know, up to his friend's house, like a block and a half away, 2 blocks away. And, you know, or whatever. My daughter is different because she's younger, not because she's necessarily a girl, but yes, because she's a girl, but also, so I'll like, you know, if she wants to go up to her friend's house, Simon's got to go with her, you know, those kinds of things.
Cool.
And because he's older too, and everything. But so he has to, in this film, you have to like make sure that every single parent who is watching this, like doesn't say, oh, what an idiot. I can't believe they did this or that or whatever. I would never do that. They're good parents, you know, they pay attention. He's very protective. He's very like careful. And yet this still happened. And and so the scenario I thought was very well written for that.
Yeah.
To where,
I
any
agree.
kind of parent would look at it and say, oh, okay. Yeah. They were careful and yet this still happened, kind of thing, which I think speaks to what you were saying at the beginning, which is like, why scare people for the sake of scaring? I get that. I don't think that this was intended for that necessarily. I don't think you do either.
No, as I said, stories happen. This happens, you know, whatever. We haven't covered Room, but real crazy stuff happens. I did acknowledge that at the beginning of the episode, and I'm not downplaying that. Just talking like practicality. Like there's a lot of impractical things that happen, and it's the impractical, it's the rare stuff that does get our attention. That does make us, you know, sit up and take notice. Plane crashes, probably, you know, we're probably never going to be in a plane crash. They happen, and if a story comes out, like I'm watching Yellow Jackets, it's all about a plane crash that happened in make-believe land. I'm going to watch that. I'm going to eat it up. This is the kind of story, though. The point I was just trying to make was, it bums me out that a lot of parents will watch this and think it's more likely than it is. It's not that it isn't likely, or it isn't likely, but it's not that it isn't, you know, possible. It's just our imaginations, our fears always, you know, play bigger tricks on us than we appreciate. And it sucks that I think a lot of, you know, parents will watch this and say, oh my God, you know, clutch their kids or whatever. Like it just becomes this little fabrication of evidence based on fictional storytelling. Like that's a real phenomenon, like, you know, rationalizing from fictional evidence. That is a very real thing that we do as human beings, because everything is a story. Everything in our life is a story. Like our country is a story. The fact that rule of law exists, that's just a story we tell ourselves. Traffic is a story that we tell ourselves, you know, that someone's going to obey the rule of law because there's a, you know, painting on the floor. Like that's insane, but it's a story that we tell ourselves and that we believe. Seeing some fictional story, we do rationalize that this could happen. And of course it can. Again, I'm not denying that. My whole point was, you know, it can start to play up a little bit more in our fears than is, you know, probably reasonable. It can take up mental space more than is probably reasonable. And I'm also saying this as someone who gets in 100,000 fights a day, every day in my mind over stuff that will never happen. Like you know what I mean? Like if you catch me in my silence too long, I'm all of a sudden fighting someone that doesn't exist. And it's just like, well, okay, Wes, maybe stop worrying about things that aren't going to happen, and enjoy life a little bit. That's my only belabored point, for sure.
Yeah. I mean, you could say the same about Taken and stuff like that, you know.
I'm not discounting that these are fun, entertaining movies. I've never discounted that. Okay.
I know you're not.
Yeah.
I'm not saying you are. I'm not arguing with you. Okay. I'm just saying, I'm not arguing with you. It's interesting that you're calling it out for this movie.
Well, we haven't covered Taken. But
we've covered others that are like,
really? But you know, this is the most, because of what you said at the beginning about the authenticity of it. This feels the most real.
Oh, okay. Yeah,
no part of this feels like, we've covered 7, but I don't think I need to point out that you're not going to be a victim of a serial killer. That's whatever. For any reason, it doesn't even matter. I don't have to fulfill that sentence. Like for any reason, there's no reason to be afraid of that. We covered Mindhunter. Like again, that it's so heightened and unrealistic. This is the most realistic thing we've covered. And I'm like, I feel those feelings as a, fatherless man well up in me. And I'm like, I cannot imagine as a parent what watching this feels like. It's probably like just terrorizing, your dreams or whatever. And so,
I get you.
Yeah.
I get you. Yeah.
The realism of it. God, there was one other thing I wanted to throw out.
Sorry, I interrupted.
No. It's a great conversation. And I appreciate it because it's easy to, I guess, only hear the things that I'm saying, that make it sound like I'm not acknowledging tragedy, even though I repeatedly did. But I think it's something that listeners could probably tune in and say, oh, Wes is an idiot that thinks tragedy doesn't happen in the world. Of course I do. Like, yeah. And so I appreciate
you think you've
elaborating
stated enough.
on it. Yeah.
I think you've stated enough that obviously
but it's a good point. Why this one
happens.
and not others? Yeah.
It's not you don't need to save face in that.
Yeah.
It was more of like, and you explained it well. It's because it's so.
Yes. But to your point, like talking about Keller, I think what works so well about the story is what you were like pointing at, which is, okay, let's tell a story about a kidnapping of two helpless little girls, and who is the worst people to throw into this situation? Like, what's going to create the most drama? Let's do this survivalist, whatever, home remodeler, and make him one of the dads. And then his opposition is a music teacher and a veterinarian. Like, these are very heartfelt people. And now let's throw all these three, characters together in the same room and say, hey, I think I have a way to get answers. Like, you're absolutely right. Keller is the very archetype of someone that we would expect to take matters into their own hands. And Nancy and Franklin are the very kind of people we would expect to not. And so the temptation is this domino effect of, well, we didn't think we were those people, but suddenly we're those people. And so it doesn't matter almost what kind of parent you are, you get won over, I think, into believing that you have to do whatever it takes. And if that means breaking this guy's face, scalding him, whatever, we're going to do it. And so it's just a really good slippery slope of argumentation that takes over. And I can imagine to some extent it starts to kind of right itself. Maybe not, but I can imagine if you just create the right situation with the most interesting people, a lot of these scenes are going to take over, and it's just going to suddenly be, okay, well, it's not that he's an idiot, Alex. It's that he spent his childhood drugged up. And at a certain point, he lost his faculties. Same thing with that other guy, with the trunks. Like, this guy, he got completely destroyed as a kid because of this traumatic thing that happened. And what do you expect him to do? He's trying to almost help and figure it out on his own, but he doesn't have the faculties either. He's better off than Alex because he spent less time, but he's still just burned. And so just a great job of finding a way to put all the worst characters together that you can to tell the most compelling story that also gives you just enough light to find the end of the tunnel. It's just genius storytelling. And I think it starts with the starting point of what's the worst thing that can happen to the most devoted dad in the world. Oh, okay.
Like Job. It's like
Job.
the story of Job, right?
Yeah.
And then like testing your faith. I mean, that you brought up an interesting point. How fun would that be to write this?
Yeah.
Like, to be the guy, because you're not physically, torturing somebody. You're just writing it down. And so to have that daydream of what would I do to somebody that I found that I know took my daughter, like, what would I do? And just write that on the page. I'll bet. Who's the writer? Aaron. Yeah, okay.
Guzikowski.
Yeah. I'll bet he had a lot of fun writing a lot of shit that did not make that made the cutting didn't make the cutting room floor. You know what I'm saying? I'll bet there's some brutal stuff in there that either Denny said, hey, how about we do this or whatever, or maybe he wrote it and then was like, no, that's too much or whatever. Like, this is not what he would do. But I'll bet he wrote it from his own perspective first. And, and then kind of paired it, like molded it into what he would think that Keller would actually do. Because if you think about it, the water is brilliant. And like when I first saw the movie and I saw that he did that, I was like, man, why doesn't he just start breaking bones, But at some point it would kill him. And he said, so he calls it out. He's like, I can't hurt him anymore without killing him. And it's like, okay, so what do you do to somebody that you want to hurt? But if you hurt them anymore, you'll kill them. I mean, scalding water, it's pretty brutal, but there's a purpose to it. And it's thought out and methodical and Anyway, I bet the writing was pretty fun at some point, right?
Yeah, because especially if he is a dad, right? If Aaron Guzikowski is a dad.
I don't even know if he is or not. But
same. But if you are, you're like, okay, I get to have my ultimate revenge fantasy right now.
Yes.
Let's go.
Yes, exactly.
You do. You take it to the nines, man.
The only thing other thing that I'll say is just the music and how incredible the music was. Because it had this specific it had a motif, right, that just came back over and over and over again. And the good thing about the motif was that the longer you spent in the piece of music, the main piece of music, the more intense it got, right? So we could live with it for 30 seconds or a minute, and it would just kind of like gave us a moment, right? It would like tell us okay, feel ominous right now or something. But then, in the, I believe it was in the scene where he had found her and he was driving to the emergency room. It just kept going and going and building and building and building and rising and rising and rising. He's bleeding. And that was such a great moment where he's just, he has been, to your point, he has been failing this whole film, just completely failing. And so it sets this up perfectly because we're thinking, is he going to fail again? First off, get into the fucking house and shut your mouth. Don't be loud and tell her that you're there, right? Like, just get in and then get to the room. And he's going slow and he's just looking around. He's like looking at the picture of the father. He's just like, oh my God. And finally he gets the girl and he's bleeding and he gets in the car and he's rushing to the hospital. And he's like, stay with me. But you're thinking he's totally going to crash or something. He's going to fail. He's not going to get there in time because he's failed in every other thing, to your point, right? But the music really sets that up because we hear this motif, and that motif has been, he's failed almost every time is when we've seen it. Like even in the chase scene where he chases that guy and he loses him, right? He loses the guy. He chases him and loses him. Right. And then, right. So every time we hear it, it's like he's failing. So then we're hearing it in that scene at the end and in the rain, and we're thinking, oh God, here we go. But it just keeps rising and rising and rising and building. And it's just absolutely perfect. And I love that we go back to it and to different iterations of it and different, they use different instruments to do it and for different purposes. And it's just really beautiful. But the biggest thing is Denny's use of Radiohead at the end. That Radiohead song.
I missed it. Oh my God.
Oh.
Yeah.
How did you miss it?
I don't know.
Oh my God. So we're sitting there, I guess when
is that the excavation site where they're excavating?
Yeah, but it starts before the excavation site.
Oh.
It starts, I believe, I can't remember if he's sitting on, do we cut from him sitting on the bed where she says, thank God he did what he did or something. And then we cut to the excavation site.
I think so.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So it starts with him sitting there and she says that, right. And she says, thank you or I miss him or something like that about Keller, because she said, is he going to go to prison? He said, probably. Are you going to find him? He said, probably. And then she says, thank God he did what he did. They kept their faith, which I love that you mentioned that. I didn't even think about that, honestly. And then she turns to him and says, I miss him or something. And he doesn't react at all. He is like, just looks at her. And then Radiohead starts. And it's called, the song is called Codex. And the way that it ends, the way the song ends is abrupt. And in the shot, I love that they start it before we get to the ending scene. And then we're in the ending scene and it's playing and we're thinking, this is so out of place. It's so like, what? A Radiohead song? Okay, this is telling us this is the end, right? This is telling us this is the end of the film. It's obvious and it's out of place. We've never heard it before. And then what happens? The excavators turn it off. It was part of the music they were listening to. And so that's how it ends too, is that they just turn it off. That's how the movie ends. It just cuts to black, right? With him noticing, finally listening, to your point. He finally listens and he hears the whistle. He's there and he's just like living and stewing in what happened. And the vibe of the song is perfect. The use of it is perfect. The placement is perfect. It's fantastic. I just wanted to call that out. That's all.
Nice. To your point, like there's a lot of car stuff in this movie. Like it's almost a car movie itself. Like there's so many, and there's a couple of like car stunts that I actually think are pretty awesome. Like we're used to like car flips and car explosions and whatever, machine guns coming out of hubcaps or whatever. Like, and so I really appreciate simpler car stunts, like the one where Keller crashes out of the hospital in his truck, right? The parking lot, and he like jumps the parking lot into traffic and just barely misses like 50 cars. Love that. I love, oh my God, the race to the hospital is so good. And I think I love that it's almost mundane, like in the drama of trying to get to the hospital, while he's bleeding out and while she's in the back seat, vomiting. And we spend so much time just watching him drive. And of course, like you said, the music is pumping and the audio of the traffic and the near misses, like that's heavily dramatic. And it's the kind of thing where I can imagine, another storyteller might say, let's just cut to the hospital. But this movie is largely not about the big moments in terms of the gunfight. Like the gunfight was very quick. It was bang, bang, and it was over, right? The long moments are the moments that we really experience. And I think this is also what lends it so much authenticity, is those big bang, bang moments that happen very quickly. But the real moments, getting her to the hospital in time, take a long time. It's very slow. And I love that because that's real. Like you want her to be immediately at the hospital getting help, but she just got injected with whatever, ketamine or some other drug that she just pumped in. And he knows seconds matter. And feeling all those seconds in that drive is so cool, especially because we cut to the car, blazing through traffic. And what we mostly hear initially is actually the windshield wiper, and it's thumping, and it feels like her heartbeat. It feels like her pulse, like doom, 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 doom. And it's just this beautiful, like it gets our heart racing as he's, speeding through traffic, narrowly missing cars, losing vision. And I love the framing just kind of keeps getting more and more blurry, and they use these great shots. One of the hardest things is to capture like rain or snow on film because there's just not enough light to capture. So you usually have to go way, way heavier on rain specifically. And the way they frame him in the driver's seat sometimes is by being outside the car, shoving him over to the left of the frame. And now we're watching traffic move by, but it also gives us more space to see the rain or sleet, whatever that is that's happening on screen, fall into frame. Because without that, it's just going to be hitting the car windshield, and there's just not enough time to let it live and breathe on the screen real estate. And so by just shifting the frame, one, he feels much more shifted and squished in the frame and pressed, right? But it also allows for more of that visual communication of the hazards of the driving conditions at the moment, on top of him kind of starting to lose consciousness. Yeah. And I love that.
And when he gets out of the car, the slip. When he slips, it's like, oh God. I don't know if that was scripted or if he did that.
I think, maybe not in the script, but I can imagine on set, you don't want it to just feel too easy. Like,
even that, it's been pretty hard for him up until that point, but it's still harder. You're still going to slip. You're like, oh my God, come on, man.
We're there.
Yeah.
I think it's a great, great movie. I got nothing else to add, man.
Yeah, man. I love the questions it asks. I love your point about the, that you made about the losing your religion and your faith and your faith changing and either growing or dying and what that does to your life. Like that's really, it's really heavy, and it's Denny, man. Like, I don't know. Like, I think the guy is a genius story crafter, and you could give him any kind of story, and I feel like he'll be able to tell it on film in just a way that not many people can,
Agreed.
Because he dedicates the time to the characters,
Yes.
At least, especially in this one, in this film. And is this the one? What's the one where you said he made them two at the same time? Is this an enemy?
This an enemy, yeah.
Like right back to back or at the same time or something? Like
literally, it was so crunched for time that they were made so close together that both of these films, Prisoners and Enemy, both screened at the same festival, Toronto. So he had two films playing at once, which never happens. But then on top of that, he didn't even see Enemy full cut until he sat down and watched it in the theater. Like, that's how, like, on top of these, crazy.
Well, but he was part of the cutting.
Yeah.
Right.
It was like he's working with the editor or whatever. But by the time, like, he locked the cut, and then it still has to go through whatever, mixing, mastering, sound editing.
I see. Yeah.
And so he was still, working through that. But by the time they actually finished all the phases of coloring, whatever, and hey, here's the final thing, like with the score, like, I don't think he ever saw a full cut with the score on top of Enemy. And so, like, he was just doing a lot all at once. And he sat down to watch Enemy. And
that's full trust in your people.
Yeah, it really is. He was like, you know what? Because they offered to let him. They gave it to him like a few days or maybe a week, whatever, before the screening of Enemy. He was like, nah, you know what? I'll see it in theater because what can I do? Like,
yeah, exactly. That's true. Yeah, it's done. It's out. Yeah. Okay.
Pretty cool.
Brilliant, man. I love it.
So what are you going to recommend this week?
Okay. So I'm not going to recommend a film. I'm going to recommend a band called Elbow. If you haven't listened to Elbow, I've recently refound them again. Man, one of my favorite bands about 10 years ago, and just kind of dived in. Guy Garvey is the singer, and he's an incredible lyricist. And when I say that, I don't say it with any kind of like idea that anybody is even close to this guy. Like, that's how good. I would challenge any other lyricist to write anything more beautiful than what Guy Garvey does. It's just, he has this way of saying the same thing that you already know in a much more beautiful and eloquent way, and talk about random things like a guy driving a crane, a tall crane, and have it be the most beautiful song you've ever heard. I'll recommend Elbow.
Nice. Any album in specific, or just check them out, check the whole catalog?
That's a great question. I mean, you could start, if you're into poppy stuff, you could start with Leaders of the Free World, but then you could go to Sleep in the Back. That's probably their best one, Sleep in the Back.
Nice.
Yeah.
I am going to recommend Mystic River. If you watched Prisoners and you said, you know what? Not dark enough.
Nice.
Mystic River is the one for you. It's got, once again, a banger of a cast. I mean, Sean Penn, Lawrence Fishburne, Tim Robbins, like a lot. That's just the start. And it's a Clint Eastwood film from, I think he had this miracle like 5 years where he just put out some really incredible pieces of work. And this is Mystic River is one of the hardest hitting films. Like, yeah, that'll leave a mark. So
I haven't seen it. I'll go watch.
Oh, well, welcome, sir.
Welcome to hell. Seventh circle of hell.
Oh, yeah. So we have another artist spotlight this week. This one is Book of Perseus. It's by it stars our buddy Aaron Alexander, and it's a homage to Book of Eli. So if you enjoy Book of Eli, I think you'll appreciate this as kind of its own, I don't know, appreciation film, almost fan fiction. It's a film by Brian Sloyer, and looks nice. The choreography, though, the fight choreography, especially, I mean, it's so good. Like, you can see Aaron just doing his thing. And so, hat tip to Mr. Alexander, you can also see in Creed 3. He plays one of the characters at the beginning. And so check out Book of Perseus. I'll embed it in the show notes so that you can, just hit play. Stay tuned for next week. We're going to go way back. This will be the oldest film that we've done together. I think the only other older film you did by yourself, which was The Count of Monte Cristo, like the 1819 cut or whatever you watched. We're going to do The Great Dictator. This is Charlie Chaplin's old film. Neither one of us has seen it. We have no idea what to expect, but it's an interesting, I don't know. This is his first talkie. Like, this is the first film that Chaplin did that was him, taking advantage of sound sync. And so, yeah, I'm curious to see what that experience is like. And this might be my actual full first Charlie Chaplin film. Like, I don't think I've ever seen Modern Times or any of his other big works. And so, yeah, this will be interesting. We have no idea what to expect. Maybe we'll hate it. Maybe we'll appreciate it for what it was in its day. Or I don't know, maybe we'll love it. So stay tuned for that. I'm sure it's streaming somewhere. It's really old. It's probably free everywhere. It's probably already on your phone. It comes with the iPhone. Yeah, that's right. You get The Great Dictator and YouTube. And so,
YouTube does not come with an iPhone, by the way.
Oh, it does not. Okay. Well,
right.
You remember back in the day, they forced downloaded a new YouTube album.
I do. Yes. Yes. Oh, U2. I thought you said YouTube.
Oh, no. Oh, yeah.
No, I remember that. Yes. Yes.
If you're enjoying this show, don't forget, subscribe, drop us a review, leave us a note. If there's something you want us to talk about, kind of things you find interesting, happy to do it. If you want to comment on this episode and tell us, the best way to torture someone for information, because you know what, Wes? You just don't know the right way. You just haven't been introduced to the right tools. Waterboarding, that's out. That's old news. What really works is whispering and crunching, like Captain Crunch in someone's ear. That'll get them to break. No,
it's sniffing. It's
sniffing.
If you sniff at Wes, he'll tell you anything you want.
Anything. Just make it stop. You can comment on this episode at thepestlepodcast.com/prisoners.
And our quote of the day is from Arthur Conan Doyle. There's nothing more deceptive than an obvious fact. Ooh, that's beautiful.
It's really good. I mean, I think that's the downfall of Detective Loki, is he keeps seeing all these things for what they are, right? Obviously, she's drugged out of her mind, and she probably opened that window yesterday and forgot. Oh, well. That's an obvious fact, right? That's obviously true. And so it's the ability to question what you think to be true, and to pursue leads that seem obvious in the first place. Yeah. I always like, every time we do one of these kind of detective stories, I go back to either Agatha Christie or like Arthur Conan Doyle. Like, I haven't read any Sherlock Holmes, and from what I've read, even Arthur Conan Doyle began to hate Sherlock Holmes. He tried to kill him off, but fans hated it so much that he brought him back. In the books. Yeah. And so I'm always interested just to see what he thinks about whatever deductive reasoning and logic and detectives. Yeah. And so it's hard. How do you second guess what you know to be true?
Well, I mean, if you're a detective, that's what you do. That's your whole reason for existing, for doing your job, is to do that exact thing, right?
Yeah.
Like me and you all day, we can just, that's a car, that car is out of gas, or what, I don't know, whatever that person is running. But the detective is supposed to say, what's that person running from or to, or has a hitch in its gait, he probably has a hip pain or whatever. Like, that's your job as a detective. And he's a horrible detective, So anyway,
Nice.
Yeah, wonderful. Great quote, man. Thank you guys so much for joining. I love this episode. I love it when we can have this back and forth.
Yeah, for sure.
And I see something one way, you see something another way. And we like find these things, these little gems in what each other say that we can identify with. I love that.
Love it.
So hopefully you enjoyed it too. If you have a friend that you think would like our podcast, please share that, and subscribe, review us wherever you get your podcasts. It all helps a lot. And join us next week. We'll be doing The Great Dictator. Until then, I'm Todd.
I'm Wes.
Go watch some movies.